People often ask how the Mary Rose sank, and it's a very valid question, it's what everybody wants to know. But she was actually a very successful warship for 34 years. She didn't sink at the beginning of her career. She was very successful for a long time, and some people have missed that because it's been misquoted in history books and even in newspapers. Some people say it was overloading, some people say it was incompetence by the men, some people say that it was perhaps incompetence by the officers, or that the gun ports were open. But I think with any maritime disaster, it's usually a combination of factors. If it was only one thing, the crew would cope with it. And the other difficult thing is that over time, stories get embellished and get retold. And some of the theoretical ideas of why she sank were written 50 years after it sank. So I think the important thing is to go back to eyewitness statements. And we do have some of these, but perhaps the most reliable one said something like, this was from someone who was on board and survived. They had fired the guns from one side and were turning to fire the guns from the other side, and there was a gust of wind and they had failed to close the gun ports. And this very much to me suggests that it was perhaps a bit overloaded, but the final part of it was that once the gun ports had gone under the waterline, it would have been over very, very quickly and they wouldn't have been able to rectify it. So the short answer is I think it was a combination, but it's also very important. The recovery of the Mary Rose, I think, is a fantastic story of human endeavour. It's almost a balmy idea. Alexander McKee in the 1960s had this dream of finding the Mary Rose, and I think people thought he was crazy perhaps. But he and his team searched for ages, and in 1971, after 6 years, they saw the first timbers of the Mary Rose. But it still took another 18 years before a very large excavation was mounted by the Mary Rose Trust, and then we raised it in 1982. And the actual raising was quite incredible. It was raised by a completely different method that no other wreck has been raised by, whereby we actually attached cables inside the ship rather than having strops underneath the ship. And then the whole ship was actually raised up a few inches at a time, and I was actually one of the divers who was doing those dives raising the ship. It was a very long, drawn-out process. But that's because it was very, very fragile. Some people have compared it to trying to raise a broken eggshell from the bottom of the sea, or a petal. And so it had to be a very innovative method to raise it, and it's not been used since either. And we had problems during the salvage, but in the end it was successful, and it's just fantastic that it's now on land and it's been able to be seen by millions of people over the last 25, 26 years. Diving on the Mary Rose was a fantastic experience. I was fortunate or privileged enough to be amongst the team who did the archaeological work, raising the objects, but then on the team that did the salvage. And during the excavation, every single dive, you would find something different. On one time it might be a comb, on another time it could be a chest, another time it could be a coin or some coins. But the one object that I particularly remember, and I don't know why, was just a simple wooden spade. And it's just, for some reason, the one object that I sort of held underwater and thought the last person to hold this was a Tudor sailor. And I don't know why that particular object connected with me in some way, but in a way that's what I hope this museum can do, that there must be something in this museum that anyone in the world almost could connect to. Even if they're an Aboriginal Australian ballet dancer, there must be something, whether it's a comb or the end of a shoelace or a ring or a rosary, that they would be able to connect to and think, that's amazing. That object there is over 500 years old and was once in use on a Tudor warship, and that's the strength of the Mary Rose collection.
The Mary Rose is currently unavailable to the public until 2012, as a new museum is being built around it.